Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balzerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real-world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centro. To learn more about our AI-powered data security platform, please visit centro.io. Let's dive in. So, in your professional opinion, what is the biggest challenge organizations are facing when it comes to data security?
Yeah, I think it's really just that foundational item of data discovery and data classification. Um, like anything in IT and security, uh, uh, you don't know how to protect something if you don't know what it is and where it's at, right? Um, just like uh, just like physical assets that we have, CIS critical controls. I think it's number one, inventory of all your assets. Well, data is an asset when you think about it, and it's the same challenge, right? Knowing what you have, and you got to know what you have before you can know how to protect it.
This I feel like can be a very loaded question depending on who you're asking. But from my privacy vantage point, it's not just hackers or ransomware. I believe it's data sprawl in an AI-driven world. Sensitive information lives across clouds, SaaS tools, third-party processors, and AI models. And without a clear inventory, classification, and governance strategy, organizations can't effectively protect personal data, meet regulatory obligations, or, dare I say, even build trust with their consumers. So, for me, that's kind of where it's at. And, where society is headed with this AI technology. I think it's ever more important now, to figure out where your data is, to classify it and know what to do with it.
I would tend to say if you don't know what you need to protect, that's a problem. And I think sometimes that leaks to the fact that we need to highlight that to leadership and or the business. And sometimes that could be equally challenging. Why you are here to protect this information. And sometimes it's because we haven't had an issue before, but the potential that the information could be detrimental to an organization could be very bad very quick, especially now that many organizations are embracing cloud and we're sharing information with third parties more than ever.
I would say the cliche answer, number one, would be what is your data? And I can dive in that a little bit later about generic security versus industry specific or tailored security. And the biggest thing is it's a mix between process driven and trusting your engineers that are in the trenches.
When I really took a chance to think about it, it really gets back to the fundamentals and the challenges that I've seen with a lot of organizations out there, both from a consulting side, but also being on the industry side, is balancing regulatory requirement compliance with the actual fundamentals behind data protection and the spirit behind protecting data for users and the company. So getting down to it, moving into holistic data protection program governance, as opposed to quote unquote check the box or ad hoc deployment of technology or point solution. So, at a high level, I think that's one of the biggest challenges is, for organizations really to design with balancing that risk management, technology usage, but also aligning for business value to meet the needs for their organization.
That's a great question, and I think it's a question that a lot of businesses face, especially when we look at the headlines. Breach here, breach there, ransomware growing, ransomware more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. And one would think ransomware is the biggest challenge. But if you look under the hood, under that main problem that is for every organization, the how you address that big ransomware problem, there are three major challenges that kind of help to define the solution for that. And that is what is the data that we need to protect? Because we can protect everything equally because we've got to go out of business. So what is the key critical, valuable data, and all of the features around it, who has access to it, where is it located, how old is it, things like that. Then the second challenge about that specific set of the crown jewels, the valuable data, is what risks we have. Specifically, do we have to protect it in some special way, or do we accept the risk of having it open the way it is on the other extreme? Do we have any legal exposure, any implications for access, risk, availability, confidentiality, integrity, all of the things around what could go wrong that will cost to our business additional money if we don't do something about it? And the third one that may or may not apply for all businesses is the monetization of data. Like, what can we do with this data that we have within the legal and privacy boundaries to bring additional revenue streams, to maybe enhance our sales pipeline, marketing, relationship with other companies? What can we do with this data to make it more valuable? And if there is a business case, then what are the potential risks that would come from that? Because not only we're going to have additional revenue, which is what we want, but that's going to open a new set of potential risks that we need to address. So those three things, I think, address the main challenges for data security for almost any kind of organization in any vertical.
We've kind of moved to this model where we've got like distributed systems, we have rapid adoption of AI, we have cloud technologies kind of all converging all at the same time. So I think one of the biggest challenges right now we have is really trying to bring folks together and have the right folks at the table to kind of really talk about like data protection and security challenges, because of just how everything has just kind of exploded over the past few years. And that's on top of just sort of navigating organizational dynamics, where you're trying to figure out like who is the right person to talk about governance, who's the right person to kind of bring in for legal perspective and all of that.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I've been in this space. I love data security. I've been in it for about 20 years. And I'll tell you what, today it's cloud, it's SaaS, it's, no real perimeter, BYOD, right? You name it. It's all these things. Back in the day, you didn't have that, right? You had the data centers, you had file shares on-prem, but the problem statement hasn't changed, right? It goes back, again, like you said, having the inventory, what is it, where is it at? So how are you solving for that? What are you guys doing either at ADT or in any of your prior roles?
Yeah, I think the real key to having some success, I don't know if anyone has full success, but just having a very structured program. It's process, it's policy, it's technology. Being able to draft a policy that can apply to all areas of your data is very important. So that way you don't have, a different policy for this data set over here, but over here, this data is different. So we're going to treat it a little bit differently in terms of policy. You really just want to align on one overarching policy if possible. It makes things a lot easier. And then having the right processes in place for data handling and the technologies that you're going to use for controlling access to the data. Maybe it's a DLP platform. That in itself can be a whole program. It can really branch out into a lot of things, but I think it really starts with the process and policies first. And then once you get a good handle on that, you can look at the appropriate technologies to apply to it.
Oh man. So I gave you a loaded question. You gave me a loaded answer. I love it. I love it. There's a lot there, I think, to unpack for our listeners. So I heard data sprawl is a big issue. I heard AI compounds that issue. And then I heard maybe you gave us a sampling of how to solve it. So how, you're currently the director of North American Privacy. So certainly you deal with this day in and day out. You've worked for very large companies. How have you tried to solve for those two big issues? And again, I'm calling them two different issues, but certainly they come together. Data sprawl and AI. What are you doing, man?
Yeah, so we'll start with data sprawl, right? I think the first and foremost I'll say is ensuring that proper governance strategies are in place, right? And this is a partnership with privacy, security, data governance, right? Your governance teams that are out there that are trying to protect the company, from the potential higher risk issues that they may face, right? And so I'm a big proponent of ensuring that those strategies are put in place and that the businesses know how to operate within those realms. So what do I mean by that? It means by, first of all, engaging them in conversation prior to their project, right? If they're, turning on a use case that's going to use sensitive personal information, touch hundreds of thousands of customers, get in touch with your data governance folks, right? Get in touch with the folks that are leading data security and privacy to understand what those risks are, because folks in the business may not know those risks and they don't have to necessarily, right? Like their job may be to, develop this program or develop this app and get it out there and get consumers to like log in. They're not going to know everything under the sun. And just like your privacy professional or your cyber professional, we're all brought together as SMEs. And so we conduct risk assessments to understand, what it is that they're trying to do, how are they trying to do it? And so we can effectively share then how do we mitigate risks? Can't prevent risk, but you can certainly mitigate them or lower the risk, for a particular use case. So that, like, first and foremost is engaging the right people at the right time. And why do I say before? We all know that everyone wants to move at the speed of light. Everybody wants to innovate quickly and push to production. The sooner you can engage us, the sooner we can help. And some of them have long tails, right? So, that's first and foremost.
Yeah, and I think, and I've had a few episodes where my guests have brought up relationship building. I think back to good old Allstate when you and I were there. I remember coming to you, or you came to me. I don't remember, right? It feels like so long ago, but also yesterday at the same time. I remember us talking. I said, look, like, you and I are gonna be best friends. We're gonna sit down. We're gonna figure this out together. So you and I built a relationship, but how, from a privacy perspective, I feel like business understands security for the most part because it's in their face, right? It's part of probably annual training. They likely think of them as the bad guys, right? The men in black, all that. From a privacy perspective, do you face similar challenges kind of breaking through and forming those relationships, or is it a little easier on your side?
No, absolutely. I think the challenges are the same. Maybe more, maybe a little controversial, but maybe more, because to your point, right? I think you alluded to, I think most people are aware of cybersecurity, the issues, data breaches, right? Privacy, personal information is a subset to all the data that's out there, right? There is financial data, right? There's material, not public data, but privacy really has a hard focus on personal information. And sometimes people don't know that, like, personal information is personal information, like email address. Hey, like, my email address contains my name. You can clearly see it, right? And so sometimes it's hard to make that kind of real world connection into personal information to what it actually is and why it's important, right? And when we deal with like sensitive personal information, such as like financial account numbers, your date of birth, the passport numbers, it begs even more controls, right? We have regulatory regulations out there. We have laws that are out there that specifically say there's a delineation for the sensitive personal information, how it needs to be protected. And so I would say, to go back to your question, we face the same barriers. And I think one of the biggest things is education, right? How do we get in front of the business? How do we educate those that need to do it? You touched on it. One of them is those learning modules, right? That like folks can do, but I find in that's not enough. That's not enough in the industry. We need to do more and build relationships deep down, join their team meetings, have an all hands or town hall and become a topic of relevance, because in our industry, we're trying to, put the narrative out there that privacy is important, but privacy is a competitive advantage, just like security is, right? We push a product that is privacy centric. You're earning the trust of your consumers, right? And trust it's hard to get, but so easily lost. And so it's imperative for companies to ensure that, we can look at privacy as that competitive advantage, and then we can get in front of our businesses and tell that story. And so that we can all tell the story together, which is living within the mission and values of the company that you're working for.
You hit on a few things there, all kind of related, right? About, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Why are we here? I know personally, joining a few organizations, I was hired by someone for a reason, right? The CISO, director, VP, whatever. So certainly they got the mission statement, right? They had a need and said, hey, we need Ward or someone like Ward to join. Where I always kind of had not necessarily difficulty, but sometimes difficulty was talking to the other folks within the business, right? Other stakeholders. Here I am. Here's what I'm doing. Here's why you and I need to be best friends. Have you found the same difficulty in your position?
I certainly have, and I believe the key is that conversation that sometimes it's not there, because maybe it's us thinking we know that we are important to the organization, to the business, and we don't communicate that value to IT or directly to the business. We say, hey, we kind of have an idea, but we've been collaborating with other teams for data discovery. We see the data, wherever that is. It's either unstructured data, structured data. We see the movement of that data. We see the logs going in and out. We understand behavior of the user, or identities. Let's call it identities. It's to be a non-human account, and we can help in that process. Tell us how we can help you, not only better identify your sensitive data, but also how to better protect it. We need to understand what is that you consider sensitive. And I think sometimes it's easy to do with when it's clear regulations like PCI, PII, or any regulatory data, but it's a little more difficult or challenging to identify something that might not be as easy to identify. So I think that conversation with the business or let's call it data owner, it's very important. And sometimes maybe we're not quite there having those discussions with them directly.
I would say that's not probably a cliche. I think that's a great answer. So, let's start with where you went first, which is knowing your data. So, like, what recommendations do you have for the audience on how to actually do that?
I think there's a lot of, I label it generic security, right? So some programs, we got our email security, our firewalls, endpoint protection, vulnerability management, and that's great. But for data protection, it's the industry that you're in, right? So I've worked at a lot of different industries, Enron, PepsiCo, American Airlines. Each industry is specific to their data. So if you say, where is my crown jewels, or what is my crown jewels, per the different industries, that's going to change. So if I don't even know what's going to cause, something to be on the news or bring the company to a halt, how can I protect it?
I love that answer. And I love it because, I too have been in multiple industries. And when I join, a lot of folks are like, well, protect PII, protect PCI. And it's like, okay, I hear you, but what is our actual IP, right? What do we actually care about? So, kind of digging into that, because you have been in multiple industries, do you have any kind of first steps that you take to really identify what I would call the no BS, this is what we care about type of things?
I would say make friends with your BISO, right? The BISO is a liaison between cyber and the business. So, I work for a commercial real estate company. So, well, what is it that's a hacker wants to steal? I actually met with an ethical hacker, and I'm like, hey, why would someone try to, we're commercial real estate, right? So I was trying to figure out, the broker data. Okay, well, where's that broker data live? Who has access to that broker data? Let's say somebody, they're leaving the company, they're going to go to our competitor. What are they taking with them? I don't know these answers. If I just came in as a normal cybersecurity engineer, I'm just kind of going with the flow. But when I deep dive into understanding the business, learning the business, again, if something got ransomware and would cause this company to stop and we're on the news, where's that data? Who has access to that data? And that's where I would start.
And you've obviously done this a time or two, Trevor. So if that's the biggest challenge, how have you tried to solve for that challenge? What have you done in those organizations?
Sure. So over the course of my experience in standing up data protection organizations and learning from successes and failures, I've kind of developed an approach that balances both programmatic governance with technology deployment and operations, as well as providing that feedback loop as well, so that you can govern and continuously improve the organization. So we broke it down into essentially 5 main areas. First main area being more focused around governance and leadership. And at a high level, that's making sure that you have a good foundation from a leadership perspective of developing and defining the scope, getting buy-in from key stakeholders, and really aligning the program to get started. Second major area is assessing where you are. Where are you today? Leveraging frameworks like NIST CSF or others that are out there. Do a maturity assessment, identify where you are currently, where you want to be, and developing a roadmap. Third one is making sure that you have good policies and procedure frameworks to support what you are doing and clearly define those requirements for the organization, but also for the technology to enforce. Finally, fourth is training and awareness to make sure that those policies, those frameworks, and those requirements are disseminated throughout the organization, and the employee and the workforce understand what those expectations are. And then finally, from a team and organizational structure, make sure you have the right mix of team members from an engineering, operational, and a governance perspective to support the mission and to deliver the capabilities for the organization.
I mean, I've dealt with a lot of those over the years. Just thinking back to some of my first roles in data security. Most leaders, most CISOs, most CIOs, they're really concerned about data leaving, right? You mentioned ransomware, your data being trapped, being ransomed, if you will, being lost, whatever. Data leaking, people sending it out, sharing it appropriately. Obviously, there's privacy concerns, but I've always kind of tried to bring it back, right, and say, okay, let's take a pulse, right? I hear you. Data leaving, data being ransomed, all of that is super bad. We don't want it to happen. But do we even know, right? Do we even know what our data is or where it's at? So, I mean, how have you in your backgrounds started to wrap your arms around that? What is the data? Where is the data? What have you done in that space?
Well, when I started in this current role where I am, we started doing a general assessment, like in anything else. Maybe because of my background in project management, I see everything as where are we today? Where do we want to be? And how do we get there? What's that gap analysis? What are the different actions we need to take? And in doing so, in learning best practices for data governance and data protection, etc., I quickly realized that a lot of people go towards tools. Oh, we need to buy this tool. We need to install this tool. And that often ends in a variety of weak spots, like tool sprawling, or a lot of tools that are not optimized, tuned in to do what they do. And we're spending a lot of money in technology that are not doing anything for the company. That's one potential. Another one is that technology doesn't always do what we need it to do because we're just not there. So combining all of those issues, I came to the realization that in creating our roadmap, our strategy, we would not look at only tools, but also governance in the first place, and in defining what is it that we want to do, and do we have the stamp of approval of the executive leadership, and do we have the right processes to make those tools work, right? We don't want to bring a tool and start paying X amount of money per year if we don't have the process to make that actually work. So we started from attacking those 3 sides: governance, tools, and processes. And from the governance standpoint, we met with people in different teams The legal team was a huge partner for us to develop those governance, the data governance standard in our case, and defining what is sensitive data, what is PII, what is PHI, what's the data, the time frame that we need to keep a particular piece of data in our custody. What are our legal requirements, contractual requirements, with each of our key partners, etc. So combining all of that data, we came out with our data governance document that one of the goals that we had was not 100 pages policy, blah, 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 legalese that nobody understands, cares, or reads, but something more practical, something more check here, pictures, diagrams, 1 to 3 steps, things like that. So we made it very actionable. One of the things that we did, for example, was to change the previous data governance standard that had about 90 different types of data with their own data retention. So if it's legal for this state or whatever, is 4 years. But if it's legal from this other state, it's 3 years, things like that. We changed that into just 4 types of data that everybody in the company very easily can remember. Do I delete this? Well, is it one of the 4 types? That's it. Right. So we made it very easy to understand, to be actionable. Then we started from that data governance. We created the processes that we needed, and some of them we're still working on. How do we get to that point? And then we started putting tools on top. And because we already had a process and a governance, now it's easier for us to evaluate tools, to create a very fair standard, if you will, when we evaluate tools, to say, okay, this one is better than that one, and so on.
I agree. And I don't know about you, but I feel like once upon a time, this was easy, right? And when I say once upon a time, I'm talking a decade plus ago, right? You could walk down to someone's cube or someone's area, and there would be the team, right? There's your team of DBAs all sitting next to each other. You could have kind of those over the cubicle conversations, the water cooler conversations. The adoption of remote work, I think, was one of the first downfalls, in my opinion, because it makes it harder, right? You can't just walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, I've got this thing. Who do I talk to?" Like, now you got to ping them via Teams or hop on a call or what have you. So, I mean, do you agree with that? And if so, like, how have you started to solve some of those issues?
I just think, like everything, change comes, right? And so it's just about kind of adapting to, be able to meet that challenge and be able to identify those folks. And I think a lot of it comes down to like really just like being able to talk and go out to people and like, sort of lead with a sort of customer lens and think about like, how do I kind of go engage folks to think about like how I can help serve them in this way. And I think part of that is like going out there and saying like, hey, like, what are some of the challenges you're having with data security? Do you think about data security? Is that something that's important to you? And I think, a lot of people, you hear this, the concept of sort of security champions and thinking about like how security champions in an organization kind of, become this bridge between, security teams and development teams. But I think like a similar concept can be done with data protection, data security, where you're going out there and finding people that are super passionate about data and security and sort of having that mindset of like, how do we think about this in a way that's going to enable the business and keep it secure? And then through that lens, you can start to have those discussions of like, hey, so what are your pain points? How can we work together on scaling a program, or how can we think about the things that are challenging for you and to find those connective tissue between them?
I like the idea of the champions. I've seen that work in a number of organizations, right? Not just data security, but I mean, you mentioned it too, just like security champions. I think that's really smart, having some of those embeds out there in the organization that can help evangelize. I mean, you brought it up. So have you been successful finding champions and getting them to partner and getting them to help you, feed you information or what have you?
I think a lot of it really is going out there and talking to people that probably, I think you may already kind of have like some sense of familiarity with. So like you go talk to your legal team, you talk to the data engineering teams, and you say, or you ask like, hey, like, you introduce yourself and you start to kind of probe and ask questions around like, what are some of the things that they've seen? What are their experiences have been? And I think like those relationships are like really critical to have. And then I think the other part of it too is starting to be curious and more exploratory in other parts of the organization that maybe don't feel as familiar. So like you might, as an example, go out and talk to someone in customer support who, oversees customer support, and you might ask questions around like, what are some of the challenges you're having? What are the things you're seeing? And I think if you do that across the organization, you sort of slowly piece together like this group of people that are really passionate about data security, data protection, and wanna help, and maybe they don't know how, or maybe there are conflicting priorities there that they need that maybe you can help, either provide some clarity to or partner with to sort of elevate, right? So I think a lot of it kind of starts with that curiosity, and you kind of go across the org and try to find those people that like are passionate about it in the way you are.
That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte-scale data protection without the fuss, please visit Centra.io. Catch you next time.